guys, welcome back to Young Adult Adventist, also known as YAA. I'm John Ubangan.
And I'm Chandler Coleman. And our guest, that's not a guest, but is a guest, but is kind of a guest, but he's back for part two.
Part two.
Who are you?
I'm Jayden Cushing.
Jayden Cushing.
Woo, woo,
If
woo.
you-
Back for part two, the first person to return.
We won't do a whole introduction. Just watch the episode previous. So
Yeah, go watch that one.
Yeah,
Go watch
if
it.
you haven't watched it already. Yeah, but
watch
we thought we'd keep him around. We thought we thought he was
All right.
okay enough to
All right,
keep
all
around
right.
for another episode. So,
Today's
anyways, most
go ahead.
Most of you guys may have a good idea if you tuned into the previous episode what this episode is really getting into, and I'm super stoked about this
Me too.
episode
I-
because it is something that I know at camp that I dealt with a lot with. I know in my life previously. I know that I've learned a lot about this topic, and I am so glad I did. I'm so glad that God revealed it to me, and I still know that I have a lot of things to learn about this topic. Really is exciting, and it's just talking about basically what we got into our episode previously. Why should we surrender? And now this episode is just basically talking about that exact thing, getting out of our comfort zone and surrender, kind of our personal experiences with it, how we've dealt with it, how we've asked God for it. And obviously we don't have the answers, and that's exactly the point. Our stories are kind of going through the mistakes we've made per se and the experiences we've had of surrender and needing to surrender. And I think I'm excited.
All right,
I'm
me
excited
too.
to get into this
Oh, yeah.
topic today.
All right. So, going along with how most of the episodes go, I'm gonna start off with a question here.
All right.
It's kind of a deep question.
You're
here,
just
so we're
going
just
deep from the
dive
beginning.
Diving
Okay,
right in
okay.
there. So this question is, what makes comfort so dangerous?
What makes comfort? So you're looking at me, so I guess you want me
Yeah.
to answer this question.
Go ahead.
What makes comfort so dangerous? By the way, quick advertisement, quick break in the video. This book, Crazy Love, talks a lot about that, about comfort and how comfort is so dangerous. So if you want a good read of an amazing book, Jayden could recommend it to you too.
it.
I might
It's
start
an
reading it.
amazing book, and John's going to
I
read it
haven't
too.
read it yet, but
Best book I've ever read. So quick disclaimer, Crazy Love by Francis Chan. If you want to read that, it talks a lot about comfort. But anyways, the question, what was the question again?
What makes comfort so dangerous?
What makes comfort so dangerous? What makes comfort so dangerous is because so many Christians today, it's kind of like if you're not Christian, it's kind of like comfort is your security. And I feel like so often these days and in times past, so many Christians are adopting comfort as their security and not Christ as their security. And what I mean by that is they're putting, I've got to make sure I have this job that pays for the family. God may be calling me another way, but I'm not going to find out because I need a job that provides for my family. I need a job where I know I'm going to be financially stable my whole life. I need to buy this house. I need to be this, that. And it's kind of, we're all focused on comfort. And so no matter what happens in our life, no matter what turn our life takes, we'll always have security with what we have, what possessions we have in ourselves. And I think that's a dangerous thing because God can call you to do anything, and God calls us to have our security in Him and not security in the things that we can get for ourselves or that we can earn for ourselves. And so what makes comfort so dangerous is because honestly, comfort is valid. Because when you're comfortable, you're not stressed.
Yeah.
When you're comfortable, you feel like you have security. When you're comfortable, you aren't thinking a million miles a minute. You're happy where you're at, and that's the thing. You're happy where you're at when you are comfortable. And so the thing is, if we're comfortable and God isn't fully involved in our lives, we're comfortable, so therefore we're happy where we're at. And that can be the dangerous thing, is that, we kind of serve God our leftovers, as this book talks about. It's like, we'll pray to God a little in the morning, pray to God a little at night, and kind of just not really think about Him the rest of the day. But since I have a little bit of God on the side, I should be good because I have all my possessions, I'm comfortable, and just throw a little bit of God in there, and I'm good. And I think that's the dangerous thing. We're comfortable with what we have, and we think we can just throw God on the side, and that we'll be good.
What I put down here for that question is, I think it leads to complacency almost, and what I link it to is to the crowd, like crowd mentality, right? Like looking into today's society and today's where we're at as a whole is that we don't really tend to do things to push out of the social norms of this world. Like, not a lot of people talk about God, and not a lot of people really have open conversations about like their faith and their beliefs and what they're going through. And I think a lot of people don't do it mainly because they're so comfortable in not doing it, right? They're so
Yep.
comfortable in not having to talk about it because nobody else is talking about it. And I think it's really easy to see how complacent we are with the crowd, the society we have today. And I think that's what's so dangerous about it is complacency.
Mm-hmm. I think going off of both what you guys said, amazing. But I think like the human condition is wired to naturally want to be away from God because we're sinful, and it's comfortable sometimes to be away from God, I would say, which can be kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah.
But it's uncomfortable to put your trust into someone you can't see, and
Exactly.
uncomfortable to put your trust into someone who you might not like, who isn't like tangible per se. And we always want to put our trust in what we can do and what we have. And I have this quote: we like finding refuge in what we already have rather than what we hope God will provide.
Oh my.
And
We're just
and it's
opening
like
it up.
all of these things that we have, we'd like to take refuge in. Like, we want to make sure that we have a great house, we're in a comfortable house, we have like all of these, we're wealthy and are living comfortably. But in reality, like, we're if we're putting our refuge in that stuff, that's gonna go away in like how long? We have like 80 years on this earth, 80, 90 years on this earth, and then it's gone. Like, it's just gonna go away when we have eternity in heaven. And like, why would we not put our refuge in that hope in eternity instead of the stuff that's on in this earth? So that's why being comfortable is dangerous, because of that reason. We put our hope in ourselves.
Yep. That is so good. And another point here, just simple point, is comfort necessarily bad? And I would take this from the standpoint of just a simple standpoint. If you think about it just from a relationship standpoint, if you're in a toxic relationship and you think you're comfortable at the beginning, and then obviously you realize you aren't, and you realize the things that your significant other is doing is really leading you down the wrong path, you may feel comfortable, but in all reality, that's just going to lead you down the wrong path. Whereas if you're in a good relationship, you're comfortable. If you're in a healthy relationship, an equally yoked relationship, you're going to feel comfortable, and that's a good comfort. In the same way, we can be comfortable in our relationship. We can be comfortable in committing our life to God, and we can be comfortable not committing our life to God. And one of them is going to be that toxic relationship, that relationship that you think you're getting everything from, that relationship that shows you everything at the beginning, that shows you that it's going to provide for you, and then you realize, oh, this world actually just leaves me brokenhearted. And so that's the comfort that we don't want to have, because it's always going to lead us astray. But having a relationship with God and putting our full faith in God, surrendering to God, is going to bring us that ultimate fulfillment, and we're going to be comfortable that God will provide. And I think that's exactly the 2 points that Christians just need to wake up to. Not being comfortable in what you have and putting God in on the side, but being comfortable on what God will provide and truly, wholly trusting in Him.
Yeah. So before we talk about anything else, let's really stand at basis on that. Comfort's not bad here. Getting out of your comfort zone in a different way is totally what we're talking about. But yeah, like Chandler said, comfort is not bad. Having comfort in what God provides to you and the things that He gives to you is not bad.
Yeah, but that's way easier said than done, right?
So.
Because like Jayden's quote, like we're hoping on what God will do. We're not hoping on what God has done. So it's like we're putting our faith in God, and that's way easier said than done. And so, yes, that's what God calls us to do. Yes, that's what will leave us ultimately fulfilled. But God, there's gonna be times where we question. There's gonna be times where we're like, God, where are you at? There's gonna be times where we're like, God, I wanted this, but you did this. I don't really understand what's going on. But in the end, it's all gonna work out, like Romans says, all gonna work out together for the good of those who love Him. And I think that's exactly the beauty of it. God puts us through the things we need to go through in order to make us the best person that we can possibly be. And we have to have faith in that. And so moving on a little bit, I want to get into another question, kind of getting into a little bit of a personal thing here. What is a time you regret not going out of your comfort zone? What is a time you regret not going out of your comfort zone?
All right, I'll say So in the previous episode, we mentioned that I'm going to be leaving in a couple days
Where?
to go to
Where?
Bolivia
There you go.
as a student missionary. And it wasn't always that that was going to be the case. And I'm glad I've chosen to do it now, but it was my freshman year in college, and I went up for a student missions vespers, and I'm like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be a student missionary. And I told myself, if I don't do this now, I'll never do it. And in the end, like, it just kind of fell through. I think God had different plans, but at the time, it was like I thought I would never get that opportunity again because I was scared to get out of my comfort zone, and I was scared to put my faith in Christ to carry me through. And I think it was just I wasn't really ready spiritually to give up everything to Christ at that point. And at the time, I don't regret it now, because now I'm at a point where, like, God has my heart, and like it's amazing when you fully surrender to God, like what he does. And I'm glad I'm at that point now that I'm going there. But at that time, I regretted it so much because I thought I would never get that opportunity again. And who knows, maybe there is a time where there is a possibility I wouldn't have had that opportunity again. It's just thinking about that, like, I didn't have the faith to put in God for that opportunity. It just something I regret, but I'm glad I'm at that. Like, God brought me to that point.
Wow.
For me, I'm kind of going a little bit not as deep as Jayden's. His was really good, but for me, times where I really regret not going out of my comfort zone is really when, for me, it's just when I'm around a lot of my friends and not I'm not really like stepping out of my comfort zone and telling them and sharing more about Christ. Not necessarily sharing, but like acting more Christ-like and just being a witness for Christ to them. And it's kind of impacts me a little bit always when I always realize when I'm not really being the best Christian I should be, or like, I don't know how to put it in.
Yeah.
But just, I really regret times where I feel like I'm not doing as much as I should be, where I can do more.
Yeah. And for me, it's kind of off that same thing. It's kind of just I don't know. It could either be in school, because I'm a true believer of wherever you're at in your life, God has placed you in your place of ministry. Whether you're homeschooled, like God has put you there to encourage your family. Whether you're at a private school, God has put you there to be influence your fellow believers. Whether you're at a public school, God has put you there to be an influence to those around you. Whatever your university you're at, whatever job you're at, God has put you there to be an influence, and God has put you there in the place you're at to be the place of ministry. So don't think where you're going is your place of ministry. Yes, that's true, but where you're at, just as important, if not more important, because it's right here, right now. The time will never come again. That is your place of ministry. And so just thinking about like my school, all the people I was afraid to talk to, all the people that God convicted me to talk to. And yes, there were some times I took that opportunity and I was proud of myself, and I was thankful that God worked through me to do that. But there was also a whole lot of times where I didn't take the opportunity, where I made excuses, where I was like, oh, I'm just not feeling it right now. I'm just not. Because if you make an excuse, we talked about this in a previous episode, but if you make the excuses, if you let your mind make an excuse to evangelize, you will always find an excuse. And I found myself doing that. God would convict me to talk to someone. I'd be like, oh, I'm just not feeling right spiritually right now. I'm too tired. I can't do this. I'm busy. My mind's on other things. And I always came up with an excuse. And so if I could look back in the last 4 years, the one thing I would tell myself is just go for it. Stop making all the little tiny excuses that you will regret later. So many interactions, so many new people I could have met, so many times God could have used me to encourage someone, but I didn't, just because I made all these little tiny excuses, whether that's someone in my school, whether that's someone just that I see at the store that God convicts me to talk to. It's like, man, those little times, if I would have just taken some of those opportunities, I could have blessed them, God could have used me to bless them, and they could have blessed me in the process. And so it's just, that's my thing, is take the little opportunities, the opportunities that seem little, but on the spectrum, when you're talking about it from God, when you're talking about people's eternal life, no situation is bigger or smaller than any other situation. Like speaking to thousands, millions of people, or spending time with your neighbor like outside one day. one of those situations is not more important than the other. You're both impacting someone, and God's going to use you to impact that person.
I really love how you brought that up, because that's one of the first points I put down. Comfort can lead to the death of our diligence to reach our goals and to achieve better. When I say goals, I mean living a Christ life example and striving to live our life for the purpose of God. I think comfort is a very killer that leads people to disobedience, not necessarily disobedience, but like the lack of serving God. And I think Christianity isn't at all one bit comfortable. I think Christianity is probably, I don't know if
it's meant to not be comfortable.
Yeah,
Jesus
it's
says
meant,
that in
meant
the
to
Bible.
not be comfortable. And I think to really put it into a bigger perspective, the world is against God. This world is filled with sin, and every opportunity it will get, it will come at the very thing that is serving God in this world. And I think that's really, it's a scary fact, but I think that's one thing that we really need to help to realize.
And it's interesting to think about, because John just said, yeah, following God is going to be uncomfortable. It's like, oh, well, what's so intriguing about that? But that's exactly the beauty of it, is it being uncomfortable. Because if you think about your best if you just think about you personally right now, your best achievements you've ever achieved in your life, very likely they're your best achievements, not because you just laid on the couch and were comfortable, but because you went out of your comfort zone and decided to do something that you wanted to do. So it's just a very interesting comparison that I'd like you to think about. Your best achievements, the things you're most proud of doing, are the things you got out of your comfort zone, you put in the work for, that may not have been fun in the moment, but once you were accomplished with it, once you finished it, you did not regret it at all. It's the same way with Jesus. When we follow him, it's not going to be, he tells us where he's going to get us out of our comfort zone. But that's the beauty of it, because when we look back at the times where we went out of our comfort zone, we will realize that it was all worth it and that God had a hand in it the whole time.
Amen.
And another thing, just thinking about it, it's like I can't really think of a time in my whole life that I've regretted going out of my comfort zone. Of course, it's way easier said than done. In the moment, you don't feel like going out of your comfort zone. But once you do it, even as much as it may suck in the moment, always, 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 when you look back, you don't regret it. And it's just interesting how we go through it time and time and time and time again, and we never regret it. And yet we come to another certain situation, and we're like, I can't do it. And it's like we've been through this so many times. Why are we not having faith in God? Like, yes, it may not be the easiest path, but that's what makes it beautiful. The hardest paths to cross, I mean, just taking this from a literal standpoint, like hiking, right? Like the hardest paths, like to get to the top, are the paths you're going to feel the most fulfilled and the most proud of yourself for doing when you get to the top. In the same way, the plan that God has for you, if you choose to be uncomfortable, when you get to the top of that mountain, you're going to be proud of yourself. You're going to be fulfilled. God is going to put in your heart what you've been longing for your whole life.
You can't have growth without discomfort. And you can't grow if you're just staying in your own little comfort zone bubble. You can do little things at first and then keep increasing your comfort zone. And then that's how you grow. That's how you grow to be more like Christ, is pushing yourself to be more like him, not just staying where you're at. Because God does not want to leave you where you're at. He loves you as you are, but he doesn't leave you where you're at. And he's there with you every step of the way to help you get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. And kind of changing gears a little bit here, I want you guys to give yourselves an honest evaluation, because this kind of blew my mind when I thought about it too. But when talking about getting out of your comfort zone, really think about this, like what your motive is here. The reason you don't get out of your comfort zone, is it because you don't think you can do it, or is it because you're afraid of what other people will think about you? I mean, that's a huge thing. It's like when you think about, just on the surface level, when you think about not getting out of your comfort zone, you think, oh, it's because I'm not capable, because I can't do it, because I can't do what God has entrusted me with. But I feel like an underrated spectrum of it, so much of the time, people feel perfectly capable, people feel confident even, but yet, oh, I can't do this because I'm afraid of what other people are going to think. I know I'm guilty of that. I know I've seen it firsthand in a lot of other people too. It's like, I know you can do this. I'm looking at them, like, they're going to do such a good job. And they just can't commit to it because they're scared of what other people will think. It's just crazy to me. So give yourself an honest evaluation. Ask yourself, am I not being confident? Am I just staying in my comfort zone because I think I'm not because I don't think I can do it, or because I'm scared about what other people will think? Make sure it's not the second one, because if we're just scared about what other people, why is that stopping us? The Bible calls us, Jesus calls us to live for an audience of one. Live for him, not live for what other people think. And just kind of a little off topic here, but if we care about what other people think, we're going to go nowhere, because we're never going to be able to please everyone. And just like we've mentioned in many episodes before, the Bible says that when Jesus was down here on earth, he was perfect, and yet he was the most hated person. So what makes us think that we are going to be not hated, that everyone's going to like us for what we're doing? That's not how it's going to be. There are going to be people that go against us. There are going to be people that rebuke us. But we have to know that when we get out of our comfort zone, the people that are rebuking us, the things that we go through, is just the beauty of it. Because when it is finished, when it is all said and done, when God's plan is fulfilled, that is what's going to make it beautiful in the end. And so kind of moving on here, connecting surrender to, we kind of already mentioned this, but you're never going to regret going out of your comfort zone. It's just not going to happen. And surrender and going out of your comfort zone have to go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. It's not really something that you can go without. And that's why we kind of made the title of this episode the title it is. Because getting out of your comfort zone and surrender, they have to go hand in hand. Those are two things that have to go together. And I think a verse that says this, 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. And this is where we get into... I'll let Jayden tell the story. Should I read the verse first, or should you tell the story first?
Nah, let me tell the story.
All right.
So as we talked about before, Chandler and I worked at camp this summer as counselors, and basically you're there, and your sole purpose is to love these kids and to show them what Christ's love is like.
Show them the love that they may have never experienced in their life.
And you're called to represent Christ as your imperfect self. And it's insane. It's like an insane task for someone to ask of someone. So like in the beginning, I don't know, I was doing pretty well as a counselor, and like we talked about in the last episode, as soon as that starts to happen and my faith isn't tested, that's when I start to think, oh, I got this. And when I say those words, I got this, I don't got this, because I'm no longer relying on the one who can get me through it. Because it's impossible. How am I supposed to represent Christ to kids as my imperfect self? And on top of that, get them ready for all the activities we do, wake them up in the morning, get them breakfast, all that stuff. But there was a day during our last week of camp, and I'm naturally introverted. So imagine being with 10 kids like 24/7. There's like no time I get to recharge. And I was sick this week too. And I was literally I had no energy left. And I've never been to that point where I was just so out of energy, out of like pep in my step. I don't know. But we at camp, we always like lead up to Friday night. And that night is when we talk to campers about like their relationship with God. We have a play about Jesus, and they make their decisions whether or not they want to follow Christ or not. We tell them our personal story, and it was Friday night, and I was feeling that. So like the very moment that I should be at my best for God, I was at my worst. And I had not given anything up to God that whole week. I was like, I got this. It's the last week. I can do this. But I can't do it. I can't represent Christ in myself. And at that point, I was just sitting there. I was watching all my kids get ready. They were going crazy. And I was at that moment, I'm like, all right, I've messed up. I've done this all myself this whole week. And I need you, God. And I need to give this up to you. So like at that point, I'm like, all right, there's no possible way I'm doing this talk tonight unless you come into my life, and unless I surrender, unless I give it all up to you. And at that moment, there's not much signal there at camp, but somehow I just got a random text from Chandler, and it said 2 Corinthians 12:9. And if you want to read it, go for it.
Okay. I don't have the exact, wait, look, I can flip really quick.
Get to it.
It's going to be really fast. Oh, right. Close. I thought I had it on my screen, but I don't. This is very awkward because you had this whole story laid up and it was amazing. 2 Corinthians 12:9. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me.
Mm-hmm. At that point, I was very weak, the weakest I've ever been. And I'm like, all right, you promise that your power is made perfect at my lowest and when I am the weakest. Because at that point, I was the most uncomfortable I'd ever been. God had to bring me down to like rock bottom for me to finally surrender to him. And it was the most uncomfortable I'd been. And at that point, I'm like pushed, I had no other option other than to surrender to Christ or give up. And when I did that, I read that verse and I'm like, all right, God's with me right now. And then to show up, I'm a big music person, and how I recharge is like playing music. And so I just got my guitar out, I started playing, and then all my campers stopped what they were doing and started singing. And we started singing together. And then I had a friend come in, he brought in a cajon, like the box you tap, and he had a viola, and we had a big jam session before. And it just set the mood, and everyone was like, we should have been doing this more often. And it made me feel guilty because I don't know, I felt like I hadn't fully surrendered that whole week, but I know that God didn't disappoint, because that talk I had with them was the best thing I'd ever experienced. And it's the first time I fully surrendered to Christ, like everything, because I had nothing to give. I was at rock bottom. I had nothing to give. So I fully surrendered to Christ, and it didn't disappoint, and was able to have amazing conversations with these campers and show them the love that Christ had for me and why I want to fully surrender to Christ. And it's just amazing, like, what happens when you're pushed out of your comfort zone. It gives you, when your faith is tested, it makes you want to, like I said, you either have to give up or you give it all to God. And when your faith is tested, you're brought to that point, like I was, and I had to fully surrender to Christ, and it's so amazing. So amazing.
And I think there's almost something beautiful about that, is that when you're doing all this uncomfortable stuff, and when you're realizing that, oh, I can't do this all alone, and when you're at that point of surrender, I think there's almost a little bit of comfort when God's there. And I think
He provides that comfort that we've been longing for.
And I think that's what Chandler said in the beginning, the good comfort, the bad versus good comfort. I think that's a good comfort, is that when we surrender to God and when we fully give up our like, I don't know how to word this, but give up our own intentions and what we want to do with our life and give it all to God. I think the comfort of him being there, him leading our life, is surpasses any comfort that we can get by ourselves, that we can try to gain in our own efforts. I think that's really beautiful.
And I kind of just thought of this just now, but I feel like in these situations that we're talking about, when God gives comfort, he's not going to give you a whole ton of it. Why? Because if he gives us a whole ton of comfort in that situation, then we're going to want to be stagnant there. But he gives us a little bit, so then we can taste it and realize this is what we want in the future. So when we taste it, then we keep pursuing it. Instead of God giving us a ton of comfort, so then we just stay stagnant and be like, oh, I'm good. Now we start relying on myself. God gives us a little taste of it sometimes, so then we can taste it and realize that's what we want, and then we keep pursuing it. It
was amazing because I'd prayed and given it up to God, and that little like dose of comfort was that verse you sent me, and that I was able to sing with my campers. And it's amazing. It didn't make me feel any better. I mean, I got a little more energy because I knew that God was with me, and he gave me energy from somewhere, but I still felt terribly sick and like all that. So I was still uncomfortable, but the comfort he gives you is he reassures you that he's with you through the discomfort.
And one thing that I kind of want to mention here is that kind of a wake-up call for myself. I'm going to read it, and it says, when we are scared to surrender, we doubt that God knows best. And if we don't doubt that God knows best, then we are just scared of the trials that may come. When in all honesty, there's many things in this world we would be willing to go through, lots of trials for, to achieve or attain. There are many things in this world we would love to go through lots of trials for, to achieve. But when it comes to God, we are all of a sudden afraid to go through those trials. And it's just interesting to me because there's so many things in this world that we can go for. There's so many things in this world that we put out. Just looking at your friends, looking at your friend groups, so many things that your friends are pursuing with all their heart. And they're willing to go through everything, all the bad times, all the hard times to get to this goal. But all of a sudden, when it comes to God and God calls us to do something and it involves getting a little uncomfortable, oh, now we can't do it. Now we're scared to do it. Now we make excuses. And it's just interesting to me because I know I'm speaking from experience. There's things that I've gone all out for. I've put my whole body on the line for, and yet these things are temporary. And yet God calls me to do something smaller than that takes less discomfort, and then I all of a sudden am backing out, making excuses. And so just really give yourself an honest evaluation. I know I had to do that. Where is your heart really? What are you putting all your energy forth to pursue? And the thing is, even if we're pursuing things of God, like Jayden and that story just mentioned, even if we're pursuing things of God with our heart and God's intentions aren't in our heart, it's going to lead us on the wrong path. God's will has to be in it. We have to fully surrender for God's will to be in our lives. And moving on here, this is kind of, Jayden brought up this in Hebrews 11. Hebrews 11 is known as the Faith Hall of Fame. And all these people in that were people that had amazing stories. And what was a huge part of their amazing stories? All the trials they went through, all the mistakes they made. Oftentimes the mistakes they made were the turning point that brought them to God. And so all these amazing people in the Bible in Hebrews 11, if you have your Bible, go to Hebrews 11 and read some of these amazing people that are listed in there. All these people, a lot of them messed up big. They messed up big time. And yet messing up that bad is actually what helped them in their walk with God. And so just remember, at our lowest point, that if we have the right mentality, if we give it all to God, God is going to use it for his good. Because again, God uses everything together for the good of those who love him. If we screw up, and we all will, and we are going to screw up, God will use that to benefit us. God will use that to benefit us if we want him to. But that's the only thing we have to do. We have to allow him to.
I think as soon as this is over, you all should read Hebrews 11. Just have it open right now and read it, because it's so encouraging, because all the people that are mentioned, like Chandler said, they've struggled in their own ways. They're not perfect by any means, but yet they're recognized here as people who went out of their comfort zone. They inevitably, you will make mistakes if you go out of your comfort zone. You're not going to be perfect because it's unknown. And when you go out of your comfort zone, and I mean, these people went out of their comfort zone and had faith in Christ and faith that God was with them every step of the way. And that's why they're recognized. And it's so encouraging to me that, like, we can be put up with those people, and, like, we can do what they did just by surrendering to God, because they made mistakes. We make mistakes. We're all the same. It's just whether or not we decide to have faith in Christ and step out of our comfort zone. So if you are feeling discouraged, like, I'm the only one who does this, read Hebrews 11. There's, like, it's countless amount of people who are just like us, who decided.
Yeah, we look at them that they might be higher than us because God called them, God talked to them, and like, oh, these people are higher than us. They really aren't. God calls everyone. God called them where they were at. Jesus' disciples were literal fishermen that had no education, that had no spiritual education. He just wanted people that were willing. He wants people that are willing. He wants people that are willing to sacrifice, willing to surrender. He doesn't want people that are high up on a pedestal. He could care less. He wants people that are willing to sacrifice, willing to surrender their lives to pick up that cross and follow him. That's what he wants. He doesn't want anything. He doesn't call us to bring anything to him. All he wants us to bring to him is our surrender. And I think another prime example, like Jayden, you talked to me about this, another prime example of faith is Peter walking on the water, right? Because when Peter first of all, even to have the faith to even go on the water. Like, first of all, this is in the ocean. It's not like this calm little pond. Oh, you fall in. You're funny. No, if you fall in, you're dead. And so it's like, this isn't just a little thing to step out in faith for. And yet Peter stepped out in faith. He did it. He had faith. Then as soon as he looked at the things, we've heard this story a million times, but as soon as he looked at the things around him, he started to fall. And then as soon as he brought his eyes back up to Jesus and had the faith in him of the one who brought him back in the first place, then he was fine again. And it's how is that just like our lives? When we we have faith in God, we're going good. Then we're like, it's just like the perfect example is me as a counselor. The first week, I was like, man, I'm doing a really good job. This is awesome. Look, Chandler, you're doing really good. And then all of a sudden, like the next 2 days were two of my worst days I've ever had. Things were going wrong. I was forgetting things. Everything was going as worse as it could get. It was going for me. And that would happen about every time. I would be like, wow, Chandler, good job. You've got this. You're doing this. As soon as I would say that, the world would come crumbling down and I'd get humbled real quick. And it's just like God's little sense of humor reminding me, you did so great because I helped you out. It wasn't because of you at all. It was because of me. And I just think in camp it's emphasized because you are the light of God to these kids. So when you think it's you doing it, it's going to show. And God's gonna show you that that's what you're thinking. But in our lives, when we're just going through the motions of life, we need to be realizing that it's God working through us. It's Him allowing these things. It's not about what we've earned. It's about what God is doing to us, not about what we're doing.
The impactful thing about this story, about Peter walking on water, it's probably my favorite story in the Bible. There's this big storm going around him, and imagine like taking that first step out of the boat. Like, you have waves crashing up against the boat, is rocking back and forth, and you see, like, lightning striking.
I would never be able to do that.
No, this is, like, a big storm. Like, their boat is sinking. It's, like, it's over for them. But he takes a step out in faith and in discomfort and leaves, like, what might be more comfortable is the boat. And he decides to just keep his eyes on Jesus. And when you keep your eyes on Christ throughout your discomfort, it's so much easier because you're not looking at all the things that could bring you down, but you're looking at the person who will bring you up. And he will, if you just keep your eyes on him through your discomfort, you'll make it through and become closer to Christ, just like Peter did. But the moment you start to look back at that, what he thought was comfort, which was the boat, and he looked at the things around him and the discomfort, he's like, oh no, I can't do this. And then he falls in. But what's so cool is all you got to do is say like 3 words, Lord, save me. And he brings you right back up. And so like you'll make mistakes. You'll make mistakes in your discomfort. And naturally we'll want to be comfortable. But the ultimate comfort is in keeping your eyes on Christ. Mm-hmm. And it might be uncomfortable at first, but in the end, like you get eternity with him. And it's amazing to me, like he offers something so much better than all this comfort in the world. And I don't know, that's just amazing to me from the story.
I really want to point out the fact that Peter was called out from the boat to go to God, right? It was a testament, especially for Peter. And I really want to point this out. Peter was with Jesus for quite a while now, and he's seen the many things Jesus has done and is capable of. He's seen the many miracles that Jesus has done, and yet he wavered for a little bit, and that's what caused him to fall in. And kind of going back to what Chandler said a little bit about this is like for me especially, I've seen the many things that he's done for my life, but it really, really amazes me that like in times of when he is calling me out, I forget those times of when he has worked in my life. And I think it's kind of crazy that we don't look back in the moments that, oh, God was there for me before. Why won't he be there for me now, right? Yeah. And I think that's what's really scary to me is that we don't look back to the things that he's done for us. I think we should do it more, a little more, and really realize that he has, like, in every situation that he has been there for me, he has really, really come through, and he has never failed me. And so I kind of use that as a little, like, segment into how I overcome other things, is that God has always been there for me, and why won't he still be there for me?
Exactly, yeah. Mm-hmm. And kind of in the tail end of this episode, kind of we're just wrapping it back to the reason a little bit to the first episode of why we're surrendering, right? Because a big part of surrender, if you start something and then you lose your purpose for it, what's the point of it? It's like you start a job, you're passionate about it, but then a few days and you lose your interest for it. what are you doing? You're just kind of just moping around, not really doing anything. You're not enjoying what you're doing. In the same way, yes, we've got to surrender, but it's not just the surrender aspect. We've got to commit to surrendering to God every single day. Like Matthew says, take up our cross, leave it to God every single day. It's not just a one and done thing. We've got to keep going to it. And we've got to come to God at our most guilty. And I'm stepping on my own toes right here because I know this is something I'm guilty of. I will not come to God when I'm feeling the most guilty, when I'm feeling down in the dumps, when I've messed up time and time again, and I keep messing up with the same sin. I'm like, well, I'll just talk to God later about it. I just feel terrible right now. I know I need to do a lot better of surrendering to God when I'm at my most guilty. And just like we mentioned, God values you so much. You are not going to want to surrender if you're lukewarm or if we think God is way above us and doesn't want us. It's that balance. We have to surrender to God because we want it. There's no surrender. I mean, we say we don't have to do anything, but in a sense we do because we just have to want it. In the same way, when someone comes into your house, you just have to open the door for them. They'll come in, they'll do the rest, but you still have to open the door. You have to want them to come in. In the same way, we have to want Jesus to come into our lives. We have to want him. It's not just about, let God do this for me. No, we have to want him to do it. We have to truly desire for him to do it. And so a couple verses here. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear and of timid, but of power, love, and self-discipline." This is what God has offered to us. Is it just going to be in our heart? Actually, no, because we have to want it. We have to want to have these things, and then God will give them to us. And 2 Timothy 2:4, a verse that I've seen a while ago and I've never really heard quoted. It's an amazing verse that I love and one of my all-time favorite verses. I just never really hear it talked about. It says, "Soldiers don't get entangled in the affairs of civilian life, for then they cannot please the officer who enlisted them." In the same way, the Bible says we are soldiers of Christ. In the same way, soldiers can't get their minds focused on what's going on around them. They can't get their minds focused on the drama that's going on back home. They have to focus on the task that their officer has given them. In the same way with us, it's the exact same way. God is our officer. We can't get focused on everything that's going on around us. We can't get focused on what are they going to think about me. We can't get focused on, what is going on in my life. We just have to fully surrender. We can't be focused on the outside world and focus on the task that God has given to us. Because that's a reason. Like this verse says, it says, soldiers don't get entangled in civilian affairs because then they cannot please the officer who enlisted them. The whole point is to please their commanding officer. In the same way, the whole point of why we live, the whole point of everything we do is to please the one who saved us, who redeemed us, our creator, all of that. That is what we should be striving for.
And why would we want to strive for that? Just listen to the episode 1.
The episode before.
Yes. Christ's love is so amazing, and it just makes you want to.
This is a little second conviction. If you felt convicted to read Ephesians 1 after the last episode and you didn't, well, guess what? You're going to get convicted again right now. Read Ephesians chapter 1.
Hebrews.
It will not disappoint you, I promise you.
It is such a blessing. It is such a blessing.
So,
people say, I don't know, I hear on sermons sometimes, it's like, oh, here's your homework after the sermon. It's like, I don't view it as that. It's not homework. It's a blessing. Don't go do your homework. Go get your blessing. It's an amazing thing. If you read that chapter, read Ephesians 1, read Hebrews 11, you'll find some amazing things.
So to kind of wrap up this whole 2.2 episode series, guys, walking a life for God is difficult, right? It is a path that is long and narrow. It is a path that that ultimately we have to walk into blind. And I think that's what's scary about Christianity and following and living a life for Christ, is that you have to follow and you ultimately have to go to him blind. But here are a couple verses.
That's the beauty of it, yeah.
Yeah, here I have a couple verses. They're both from Psalms. The first one is from Psalms 119, 105. "Your word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path." The other verse, Psalms 16, 11. "You make known to me the path of my life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore." I like to end there because it kind of gives me a little bit of a promise that if I live my life for God, abandoning the comfort of this world, which, like we mentioned, is temporary, guys, there will be a time where he will give me pleasures forevermore.
Mm.
There's a time where at the end of all of this, right, there will be time where we will be with him and we can be as comfortable as we want to.
Yeah.
But guys, walking that life beforehand, that journey to God and having that relationship with God is difficult. There's no going
Mhm.
around it. There's no shortcut from that path. It's difficult, and Satan will, when you get on God's path, Satan will try to
Bring you down.
bring you down and snare you away from that path and really get you mistracked from what God's ultimate plan is. But if you surrender, and going back to surrender, if you surrender your life and everything that you think you can do for yourself and really just give it all to God, and just remember that God has that ultimate plan for you. Before you were born, God had already made up a plan for you. And if you remember that, guys, that walk will be so much smoother,
Mhm.
and it will be easier, not because it is of your own volition, but through God, you can do so much great things.
Mhm.
And I think the beautiful thing about it is when you walk that path and you, going back to a couple episodes, you do it for other people and walk with other people. I think it's a really beautiful thing. It's really amazing when you really put it into perspective about it's not you, it's God. Just remember that, always really trust in God, and really remember that, surrender it daily, weekly, hourly,
All the time, yeah.
minute. Surrender
We need it,
all
we
the
need it all
time.
the
Yeah,
time.
all the time. I think I would just like to read a little bit from Habakkuk 3, and then we can end
All
it
right.
there. My Bible is
Go
just
for it.
open there, and it says in verse 17 it says, "Even though the fig trees have no blossoms and there are no grapes on the vines, even though the olive crop fails and the fields lie empty and barren, even though the flocks die in the fields and the cattle barns are empty, yet I will rejoice in the Lord.
Wow.
I will
Wow.
be joyful in the God of my salvation. The sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes me as sure-footed as a deer, able to tread upon the heights." So things will be tough, like John was saying, but there is someone who is a God who is there for you every step of the way.
Yep.
And you don't have to go through the discomfort alone. And he will guide you and help you grow.
Yeah. And just a quick reminder, it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be a fancy prayer. God wants our broken heart. Just there's been so many times in my life where I've had nothing left to give. I'm just like, God, more of you and less of me. That's all I've said.
Exactly.
God, more of you and less of me. God, you become greater, I become less. Just a reminder that with all of this, you may be feeling overwhelmed. Where do I start? Where do I go? That's all you have to do. God,
to
more
God.
of you
Good God.
and less of me. That's all. That's what it's about. All of this summed up in one phrase is more of God and less of you.
Amen. So thank you guys for tuning on.
To the first two-part episode, and
two-part.
thank you,
Wow.
Jaden.
Thank you very much
Oh,
Jay,
Thank
for
you
man.
joining
so
us.
much.
We've had a
Actually-
very productive conversation.
Yes,
Yes.
such a big blessing. I love it. Just being able to talk about God with some great guys.
Mm.
Yep. We loved having Jaden. We're loving that we're getting back into the swing of things.
And if there's anyone out there who also wants to be a guest, guys,
or if you have questions about any
Yeah.
topic, feel free to talk to us, DM
Exactly.
us. We're not saying we have all the answers, but we'd love to talk to you. And I'm sure Jaden would love any questions too.
Sure. Yeah.
Anyways, thank you guys for tuning on to this episode. We'll see you in the next one.